is Ursula Lentini, and we have our wonderful guest here, Liz Mangum.
Hi.
The Way of the Spiritual Path is talking about the way, understanding the ways and principles of the spiritual path. Everything has its own ways and principles. Aging, which we did the other show about aging has its own way. So when we understand the ways of things, we can get in the way or out of our way, so the way can flow through us and with us. We won't be so confused when we understand the way. So I've got my way, you've got your way, Liz has her way. When we understand people's ways or the way of life, then we can relax a little bit and just enjoy the ride. I also wanted to introduce my services. I am a New Thought practitioner with Centers for Spiritual Living. I'm a licensed minister. That's metaphysics, and I do Pranic Healing. I've been a Pranic Healing teacher, arhatic, and I do a wonderful work called Internal Family Systems, which is the subconscious. So we go into the subconscious and we talk to parts of ourselves that we don't know what they are, but they're holding us back. So different things, like we're going to be talking about today, different life events, traumas, tragedies, hard times. Sometimes we're living from those places and we don't realize it until we kind of bump up against a wall and say, how come I can't move forward in this area of my life? Chances are there's an anchor in our past tugging us. So in the subconscious work, I can go back into the past and help heal out those things that are holding us back. Today's show, we're talking about getting lost along the way.
And if I could say a word about your services as well, I have had, most of my experience has been with you as a pranic healer. You lead these powerful sessions of meditation, and they're the largest meditation groups I've ever seen, which says a lot for your truth, your power, the truth of pranic healing. And also as a counselor, I have heard so many people, say that their life would not be the same, that their life is truly changed. And I've heard 3 people just recently, in the past month, and they actually were brought to tears by how much your work had helped them and had helped them to grow and to change and to become the people that they really wanted to become. So
thank you, Liz. Thank you.
It's true.
I feel really privileged to do the work that I do. I'm amazed that I get to do this.
And it shows you're humble. It shows that you also care and support so many that come to you. So
thank you. Mm-hmm. So getting lost along the way. It seems like the more we live, the more opportunities there are to get lost. And the spiritual path in the Bible, they talk about the path being narrow and hard. So, that's on the path, right? Can you imagine what it is to be off of the path? It's like getting lost in the woods with picker bushes and, the night and howling wolves. It's scary to be off of our spiritual path. So tell us a little bit about your lost times.
All right, I would be glad to. I haven't talked about this for a while. These were about 40 years ago. It really has impacted my life in a positive way now, but when I was going through it, I didn't know if I would be able to get through it, honestly. First of all, I was an only child in a family they were just wonderful. My mother and father both. They both were kind and good people. My mother, we always went to the Methodist church. They did so many things for other people. They were just truly the salt of the earth. One thing that didn't happen that I realized later on was that we did not talk about our emotions and our feelings. I remember my mother specifically would say, you just have to
suck it up.
Yeah. Anyway, when I became, when I left home, I went to college. When I got out of college, my first job was with the Red Cross, and we had a very special recreation program at that time. It's no longer in existence. And the first place I served was in Korea, which was a fairly stable situation. It had been taken care of, for years. And our programs, we simply took them out to the military, trying to remind them that there were people who cared about them, their sisters, their mothers, their spouses, And then they were looking for people. They had just started the Vietnam program in, I believe it was 1966, and they wanted experienced people to go, so I volunteered to go for a year there. And I was not exposed at all to the war as far as seeing killing or anything like that. But we did deal with men who had lost their friends. We went to hospitals and so forth where we saw things that it was just a very, very different time. And I felt privileged to be there because it didn't matter how we felt about the war. That wasn't the thing. What we were there was to serve and help the people who had to go because they were drafted. So that war, I'll always... I know some of the Vietnam veterans now are having a hard time. I think one big thing was that people did not appreciate their service at that time. But anyway, that was a very emotional experience for me. And then when I came back to the United States, I didn't know how to find people to talk with about it. And so I just went ahead and did my work. And in a few years, I wound up working at a wonderful advertising agency, and I loved that work. But it was back during the days, if you've seen Mad Men, it was truly about like that, where we went out for drinks at lunch. We still did our work. I don't know how we did it. But we drank at lunch, and if you wanted to, there was always a party after work. I mean, seriously, and I was single at that time. So it was kind of like, oh, this is fun. But then, it led me to have less discernment about people, I think. And I got involved with a man who was, after 1 year, he became abusive. And I had never even thought of anything like that or that people do that. And I became afraid for my life. I didn't stay in my apartment anymore. I went to stay with a friend. He was a very, very just uncontrolled person. And evidently, even his parents called me one time at work, and they hadn't heard from him in a long time. At that time, I was no longer with him. And I said, well, I don't know if I could help to find him. And they even knew. They said, no, that would not be good for you. Mm-hmm. They knew how he was.
So a lot of, people that I work with, it's the abuse in the past that they're still struggling with. Mm-hmm. We try to tuck it away and think that it's, it doesn't affect us and so what, and that was the past. But it's inside eating away and eating away and eating away. And one of the things that it eats away with is our self-esteem.
Absolutely.
And we don't feel good about ourselves. We feel shameful, especially with sexual abuse. We carry a lot of shame and think that it's our fault and, we're not a good person and that's why it happened to us and we deserve that kind of thing. Right. And we forget to let our light shine. We forgot that, we even had a light. Yes. One thing goes wrong, a second thing goes wrong, and then it gets worse, and then we have a big secret. Mm-hmm. Secrets eat away at our soul. And, you don't walk around saying, hell, I got hit today. You know right. what I mean? You just keep it like, oh, everything's fine. We put our makeup on and we just move through the day and work extra hard or try extra something else to compensate for those times and places. And a lot of people stay in relationships that are unhealthy because they feel stuck, they feel lost, they feel afraid, they feel alone. And they feel like there's no way I can get out of this and save face or just survive. I can't. I'm having a nice home and a nice job and a nice life on the outside. What am I supposed to do? Go into a shelter? Right. Oh, heck no, that's not for me. Right. So how did you kind of escape from that relationship?
Escape from that. One thing I wanted to mention that I had forgotten to mention before is that I did try to go for help. I remember going to a minister, and I was saying, I need help in dealing with this situation. So he asked me, he said, how did you meet him? And I said, well, at a party. And he said, well, what do you expect? And so sometimes when we turn, fortunately now people are more understanding, counselors are more understanding of this sort of thing. But at that time, I couldn't get help. But anyway.
But listen, it's so hard to ask for help.
Yeah.
Because our ego's like, no, don't say anything. No, don't let the cat out of the bag. No, you'll be in trouble. No, he'll find out and he'll, be worse. Right. So to have the courage to say to a girlfriend over coffee or a relative that really loves you and accepts you no matter what, it's so courageous just to open her mouth and say, I need help. Right. Something's not okay with me.
Right.
And then to be slammed down, or some people are like, oh, you're exaggerating, or just to be shut down in any way.
Right.
That's not cool.
Right. Well, back to your question. What happened one day, I finally decided, I can't live like this. And so I had forgotten about the divine. I'd forgotten, obviously, about the divine within me. I had forgotten all that. I had left it behind. And so one day, it was really in desperation. And I just prayed to God. I said, help me. I didn't have any specific prayer. How we're taught certain prayers. And I had been taught certain prayers in Sunday school and church. But I didn't remember any of those. I just said, help. And strangely enough, it was only a couple of weeks. It was wonderful. I felt compelled to go to the Unitarian Church after work. They were having, it was like a group called New Beginnings for people who were over, bad relationships and so forth, trying to get over them too. And so I went, and it was very nice. It turned out to be sort of a Thanksgiving time, so there was food and social, and, we had a wonderful time together. And my husband came up, and he said, my husband-to-be came up, and he said, why don't you take a load off your feet and let's go sit down. That was the romantic beginning of our relationship. And so it was funny. He said to me, he said, you say too much, you talk down about yourself. He said, you shouldn't say those things. And so the next morning when I woke up, for some reason, I felt happy. I just felt so happy. And so I met him, that was just before Thanksgiving, and we went to, now, neither one of us were spring chickens. He had a son by a previous marriage. He had been married for 6 years, and he said he knew that he shouldn't have got married, but they'd already planned the wedding. So instead, he went through 6 years, So anyway, we were both looking for new beginnings. And so anyway, we both went to our separate homes on Thanksgiving. And then we got engaged December the 25th and married January the 10th. Now, I will say we were not youngsters. And so it was a blessing. And that what showed me, Liz, just... one prayer, you said one prayer in desperation, and looked, the angels are around us all the time, and it was through also meeting my husband that I realized that I was addicted to alcohol, because he was not at all. And I realized I just can't keep on drinking. I can't keep this way of life. But then when I tried to stop, I wanted to be home with him, not the old way of life. And when I tried to stop, I realized, oh my gosh, Liz, you're addicted. You're addicted to alcohol. And a lot of people can drink, like the parties that we went to, and they're not addicts, but I was. And so I went to, I don't know how I started looking at AA, but I did. Maybe someone told me about it, I can't remember. But I would go to, there was an AA meeting close to where I worked, and I would go there at lunchtime. And I felt so wonderful. And of course, I didn't realize higher power, that was such a spiritual group. All I knew was how loving and kind they were, and that they had been through the same thing. They understood totally what I was going through. And it was terrible. I mean, I had to drink this special drink with yeast, brewer's yeast, and orange juice, and all this stuff just to get over the physical addiction. You know, and of course we learn in Pranic Healing how addiction can just stick with it. I mean, it's not, it's a physical thing as well. It's not something that's really easy, you know.
And it's an energetic thing. Those that darkness kind of gets embedded in our energetic system. Right. So in Pranic Healing, one of the things that we work on, there's a whole class called psychotherapy, Pranic psychotherapy, and we get rid of addictions and traumas and suicidal. There's so many things that we can work on, and addiction's a big one because so many people suffer from it. Yeah. So we work on different chakras, and the addiction gets embedded in the chakra. And even though our mind says no, inside is like yeah, more, and we're like, oh, I got such an argument. So getting support all the way through, you know, from meetings and communities and spirituality and just keeping clean and changing our circles is a really big thing too.
I even had to change my job. I could work within the same company, but I could no longer be a media buyer because that was the going out to lunch part. So I learned planning, which was a more, you know, mental thing where we still saw people and took proposals, but it was not, you know, the same type of atmosphere. So I had to do that, and you know, I just. And what I wondered, you know, how did I get to that place? How did I allow myself to get to that place? And it was not recognizing who I was, not recognizing my emotions from things from the war and other things in my life. And I just felt so lucky to be able to get out of it. Just so lucky to return to who I was. It's a very, very painful experience to go through, but I will say this, that being raised, you know, in the church with a good home, I never would have understood addiction and people who are addicted unless I had gone through it. And I wouldn't have understood abuse. Unless I had gone through it. I don't believe I would have tended to have been judgmental. Oh, how can you do that? You know, what can that come to? So it just brought me way down to the point that I wasn't even sure I could keep living. It had to be that for me to learn. It had to be that far down. And now I don't take anything for granted. You know, I don't take and to be honest, I haven't had a drink since 1981, and I would not risk going to a place where I would drink. You know, sometimes, but a lot of my friends are that way too. They don't drink now, especially as you get older. Your body doesn't tolerate alcohol, so even people who don't have addictions, they. At this age, you know,
they choose not to.
They just choose not to.
Yeah, for health and for comfort, for stability and sanity, we're more present when we don't drink or use any kind of thing. So the turning point for you, it was you asking yourself, how did I get to this point?
Yeah, how did I get to this point? What brought me? You know, that if my family knew, my goodness, how they wouldn't understand it all. You know, and I think it was just a series of small things that I never realized. Certainly I never knew anything about emotions. I never knew anything about our energy. You know, I never knew anything about how dark the dark could be, I guess.
It's nasty, isn't it? And scary.
Nasty.
Like I was saying, getting lost along in the woods. So if the spiritual path is narrow and hard, when we get off into, now the war, any war, right? They're still fighting over there in the Middle East.
Yes.
And it affects us as individuals. It affects the families. It affects the community. Because when people aren't able to be fully present in their spiritual magnificence, in their strength, in their humor, in their joy, in their gifts, then we're half the person we're supposed to be. And the other half is the darkness. Because you didn't see war, but you saw the men who were in the war.
Yes.
And you're a soft, gentle person, so you were experiencing their pain. You know, you're looking into their eyes of misery, of like, what am I doing? And I'm sure they would lay in the hospital beds going, how did I get here? So that's a good turning point to really realize, how did I get here? When we're asking ourselves that question, we're kind of in trouble. We've gotten off the path.
And even now, when people, I think they may still have the same feeling if they have a lot of illness. You know, it's easier to become, you know, to forget about the light, because if you're in pain and all those different things. I had someone the other day that actually he had had a heart attack, and he had gone to the other world for several minutes. Now, he had a different take on it. This is kind of when he said he had forgotten about his experience in heaven, but what he remembered was when he came back, he saw all the people around his bed, the medical staff, his family, doctor, everyone, and he felt unconditional love from them. That was so different from people who talk about going to the other side and feeling the love up there. He felt it down here.
Wow, I just got goosebumps.
Oh, he was, but he's saying, now I know God is keeping me here for some reason, but you know, he has a lot of pain. He's been a chiropractor. He can't do any of that. He can hardly walk. So he's trying to figure out too, you know, why is he here? It's so easy to go into darkness no matter where we are, but you know, anyway.
Well, that's important to know. Yeah. It really is.
What I learned too from, you know, the fact when I cried out for help, when I prayed to God, help me, I later learned that we have angels around us at all times, our spiritual guides. We have even our ancestors, you know, there's so many that love us and protect us. But we're given free will on this earth. And their principles are they cannot interfere with our free will. Because if we need to experience something or want to experience something, we have the free will to do it. And only if we ask for their help are they there. So that's just the...
that's the rules of the game.
That's the rules of the game.
They're not allowed to help unless we ask them for us.
Yeah. So I think,
and mind you, the ego does not like asking for help.
Right.
Okay?
Oh, yeah.
Period.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why I was saying earlier, you know, when we, you know, part our lips to ask for help, it's one of the hardest things for our ego to do, to admit, oh, I screwed up. I'm hanging out with these bad people. I'm doing bad things to myself.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, it's hard. It's hard for the ego to do that. So step one is realizing like, oh, I'm messing up. How did I get to this place? If anybody hears themselves asking, how did I get here? Because this is not cool. Then it's the ego's turn to step in and say, we need to ask for help because we're lost. If you've ever been lost, you pray that there's somebody to ask for help. So, okay, maybe there's no one to ask for help as far as another person.
Right. But
there's always a resource to ask for help. And it's through prayer. So it's through humility and prayer. We just say, listen, help. With the sincere heart, though. That's the key. We don't just say like, hey, I need some help around here, God. Get busy. That's not cool. We're usually down on our knees. I call it the boot. So when we like have one cheek in the gravel, blood dripping out of our nose, and there's another boot on our cheek, then we like pat the mat, so to speak, like in boxing and wrestling, and say, tap the mat, and we say, I surrender. And it's with a sincere heart that we, you know, are ready to receive blessings. Look, you got a husband out of that prayer.
And I have a wonderful daughter, and I'm going to be a grandmother in about 3 weeks.
You see? So it's really moving into back on the path. And that's the deal. So thank you so much for expressing. You've got something else to say.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
You know, I really... I applaud the show that you're doing, you know, the way where you're allowing so many of us to come, and hopefully it is of interest and help to others, you know.
Just you showing up, Liz, is of interest and help to others. I see the way people respond to you when you come to the Twin Hearts or when you're doing healing in the group. Yeah. And I know. See that look? We never know. how we're showing
I didn't
up.
know that.
Just show up. So thank you for joining us today. The Way, the Spiritual Path, the Lighter Side Network. So happy to have you join us. Continue watching our shows and celebrating this path with us. Thank you.